Good evening, I'm Savannah Kelly. Welcome to APTN National News. Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of Canada, announced his intentions to run in the upcoming Liberal leadership race to replace outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Hundreds of supporters gathered in Edmonton to hear Carney's official declaration of his intention to become the next Prime Minister. He says his priority will be improving the economy. He says he believes that even with a large lead by the Conservatives in the polls, the Liberals can win the next general election that's supposed to happen on or before October 20th. Carney took swings at federal leader Pierre Poilievre and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith.
In these times, sending Pierre Poilievre to negotiate with Donald Trump is the worst possible idea. I can think of one other politician I might not send. It just came to me in the last 24 hours.
The province of Manitoba is denying responsibility for the wrongful convictions of two Anishinaabe men, Allan Woodhouse and Brian Anderson. The province is arguing that Winnipeg police and the city of Winnipeg were at fault for sending the two men to prison almost 50 years ago. Sierra Bettens has more.
Allan Woodhouse and Brian Anderson are two of four Anishinaabe men convicted and sentenced to life in prison for the 1973 murder of a Winnipeg restaurant owner. In July 2023, Anderson and Woodhouse from the Penematang First Nation, north of the city, were acquitted of the murder they were wrongfully convicted of. In April 2024, they filed a lawsuit against Winnipeg, the province, and Canada and Manitoba's Attorney General. In a statement of defense filed last Friday, the province argued the convictions were caused by false confessions obtained by the Winnipeg Police Service. They say the province and its Attorney General are not responsible for the wrongful convictions, arguing the police and the city of Winnipeg are to blame. Negon Sinclair, a columnist and associate professor at the University of Manitoba, says while the province's response was unfortunate, he wasn't surprised by it.
But often what governments do or institutions do, private industries certainly do this all the time, is they deny the claim, try to pick apart the elements of the claim that they feel have some soft areas or perhaps don't have the amount of evidence necessary to be able to make the claim. And then this is where the negotiation starts to begin.
Clarence Woodhouse, also from Penematang, was acquitted of the murder in October 2024. His brother, Russell Woodhouse, was also convicted, but died in 2011. A posthumous application for his acquittal was filed on his behalf. The plaintiff's lawyer, James Lockyer, told the Winnipeg Free Press that Clarence Woodhouse will likely join the civil case, but that Russell's estate isn't eligible to join. APTN has reached out to Lockyer for comment. Sinclair says that systemic factors and racism within the justice system must be taken into account.
The flagrant disregard, the misappropriate use of force and policy, and also the continuing bias and racism within the justice system, and in particular in this case, the police, the Winnipeg Police Service, is baffling, but yet unsurprising in the ways in which this systemically continues to happen time and time again.
The province acknowledged that Allan Woodhouse and Brian Anderson were victims of, quote, a miscarriage of justice, unquote, but says it was a federal court system's job to determine whether their confession was voluntary and accurate. Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
The Supreme Court of Canada will not hear an appeal made by the Mohawk mothers over McGill University's expansion project. McGill has been conducting construction at the Allan Memorial Institute. The Mohawk mothers, known in Mohawk as the Ganes Tonsara, allege that the remains of Indigenous children are buried at the construction site following mind control experiments that took place at the Allan Memorial Institute in the 1950s and 1960s. The Ganes Tonsara have been requesting an excavation of the area to determine whether or not there are human remains. They say they are not surprised by the dismissal of their appeal, being forced to defend their case in a colonial system.
With our experience so far, I mean, it has to do with the court system itself not being in alignment with the way we conduct ourselves, and it's the same system that put us into this situation. So the way I'm feeling is it was par for the course.
This week in Toronto, the Métis National Council has started a 9-week multi-million-dollar trial against former MNC President Clem Chartier, Manitoba Métis Federation President David Chartrand, and former MNC Executive Director Wenda Watine. The MNC alleged the former administration conspired to damage the MNC and ultimately empower the MMF. Chartrand spoke to us earlier this week, and we are now joined by the new MNC President, Victoria Pruden, who speaks to us from Ottawa on the trial, the future of the MNC, and her recent meeting with the Prime Minister. I want to first ask you about this multi-million-dollar lawsuit against Clem Chartier, David Chartrand, and Wenda Watine. Can you explain why the MNC wanted to take these matters to court and what some of the allegations are?
The Métis National Council, its former president, Cassidy Caron, and the Board of Governors of the Métis National Council during 2021 and 2022 had conducted a review of finances and of operations. Those decisions were serious enough to the leaders of the day that they decided to pursue a litigation. Whichever, leaders we have within the Métis Nation make choices, actions, and follow through with good ethics, upholding fiduciary responsibility. For me, coming in as a new president at the Métis National Council, I want to acknowledge and honor that, some of the individuals involved in this trial are amazing leaders who've done a lot for the Métis Nation, and I want to be very clear in reinforcing that.
And MMF President David Chartrand, who's named in this case, spoke with us earlier this week, denying any wrongdoing and all the allegations against him. What's your reaction to what he had to say?
I'm going to be just very simple in the response. In the litigation, there are a number of pieces of evidence that just point to decisions, transactions, choices that the Board of Governors of the day and former President Cassidy Caron had identified as problematic. That evidence will be explored at trial, and the court will make a ruling. And I want to make sure that I'm upholding Justice Merritt's instructions, so I'm not going to get into any specifics.
And switching gears, President Pruden, with the Métis Nation British Columbia, the Métis Nation Saskatchewan, and the Manitoba Métis Federation all choosing to walk away from the MNC, can you explain what will be the next steps here, and will the Métis Nations ever unite again with the MNC?
Unity and unification is not possible at this particular moment in time. We have a lot of difficult issues to work through. The governments are making the best decisions I think they want to make in the support of their people, and with self-government and with the negotiation of treaties, we're in a different place than we ever have been in before. The Métis National Council itself, having been in existence for 41 years, looks different. To my knowledge, the mandate, the purpose, the role is not the same as it was. I see my mandate as helping to deal with a number of lingering concerns that were brought up when our membership was more robust, and really taking a look at what is needed today. And I look forward to being really transparent and being in communication with you and others and Métis citizens in general, and we'll see. For myself and for the Otipemisiwak Métis government and the Métis Nation Ontario, we see value here. And let's explore what that value looks like. And in the past, the membership of the MNC has fluctuated, and it may fluctuate again. We'll see what happens. I'm doing this with the best interests of our people and our nation at heart, and taking care of some of the serious issues that we have to deal with that were initiated as a result of the MNC and its General Assembly, and we've got some unfinished business that I'm going to be working on, and we'll see where it goes from there.
On Wednesday, you also met with the outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, along with the AFN and the ITK, to talk about the state of the Canada and United States relations. Can you give us any highlights from that meeting?
Some of the takeaways that I think we unanimously had were the need for Indigenous peoples, Indigenous governments to support each other. There are so many potential risks and impacts, whether they be financial, whether it be about security, whether it be the impact of the average Métis First Nations or Inuit person as supply chains could potentially be impacted by those tariffs. We need to be standing together and try to do everything that we can to protect the environment for all Canadians, but especially as Indigenous people supporting each other.
President Pruden, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you very much for taking some time for us today.
Thanks, Savannah. Take care.
You can watch more of that full interview on our APTN News YouTube channel. Donald Trump is about to be sworn in as the next president of the United States. How are our leaders preparing, and what does this mean for people living in Canada? That's the topic of this week's Truth in Politics panel, coming up after the break. Welcome back to APTN National News. It's time for this week's Truth in Politics panel. Donald Trump is about to be sworn in as the next president of the United States. How are our leaders preparing, and what does this mean for people living in Canada? Joining us now is Winnipeg Free Press columnist Neegan Sinclair and Pasqua Strategies' Jennifer Leywitz. So, Neegan, there are some developments in the search for a new leader of the Liberal Party. So far, a handful of candidates have thrown their hat into the ring, and more are considering before the deadline on January 23rd. What do you make of the current crop of candidates, and do any of them stand out to you?
Well, it's all pretty much as predicted. It will be a Freeland-Carney likely front-runner race. There are some other candidates, including Mi'kmaq candidate Jamie Battiste, who has certainly announced that he will seek the leadership. This is a Carney-Freeland kind of inner liberal that scuffle that will certainly look to kind of insider, outsider versus the party. Will it be something in which Freeland, who's very closely tied to Trudeau, even though in the final days had left him, continue some of the legacies that Trudeau have? Or will Carney, who is a self-professed outsider, be able to take some sort of leadership, offer a fresh vision to the party, and really offer something that people who are quite outside of the Trudeau legacy are certainly feeling that they're concerned and not comfortable with what Trudeau has done over the past few years. Will he be able to refresh the party, give a new paint to a very old building?
Jennifer, Neegan touched upon this a little bit. Mi'kmaq MP Jaime Battiste has announced his intention to enter the race. Do you think he's a serious contender to become the next leader of the Liberal Party?
I don't think he's a serious contender against the names like Chrystia Freeland and Mark Carney. And I also think, this might be an unpopular opinion, but I also think that this is kind of a shame, to be honest with you, because he is an Indigenous MP and he is the the parliamentary secretary, to the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations. And now, especially across Native country, we have really promoted the idea that this could be Canada's first Indigenous Prime Minister, even though it might be on an interim basis and maybe a few weeks to a couple months. But there was a real opportunity there to see, something happen for the very first time. But again, it goes back to the last 5 years of his time in government. Where have you been? We have seen MPs within the Liberal Party break party ranks on issues that are very close to home to them. Anthony Housefather, Rob Oliphant, we've seen that happen. So I think there was a real opportunity here for him to come out, not swinging, but coming out a little bit stronger on issues like child welfare and, other areas that our people have been watching and paying very close attention to government and some of the strongest voices on the bench, but he just wasn't there. And so now I guess I have to ask that question of where have you been and why should we trust you now?
Mm-hmm. And Neegan, a federal election is likely around the corner, but U.S. President-elect Donald Trump will be in power long before that happens. How could Trump's presidency affect the federal election process and results here in Canada?
Yeah, so first, apologies to Jaime Battiste for mispronouncing his name, but the Trump election and the inauguration, which we are just a few days away from, will substantially impact both Canada in terms of the 25% per promised tariffs that will impact particularly energy and resource use here in the country, which we know drastically will impact Indigenous and Canadian relations because it will discourage companies to act ethically, to act responsibly when it comes to dealing with First Nations, because their money will be even tighter than ever as we see tariffs coming down and impacting corporations' bottom line, which they will pass on to Canadians, which will create a further situation. And we know that when resource and energy use becomes on the table and becomes of concern to Canadians, usually Indigenous peoples talking about Indigenous rights suddenly are seen as in the way and conflictual and not on the national agenda or not on the program, et cetera, which creates a combative relationship. That will be undoubtedly seen on the ground between Indigenous peoples, First Nations particularly, and Canadians. But I also think that this will create a kind of culture And we're seeing it amongst the Canadian premiers in particular, of trying to fill the vacuum of who will speak for Canada. Will Canada have a united voice? For example, Alberta seems to be acting completely on its own, surprise, surprise, when it comes to dealing with Trump. Meanwhile, all the other Canadian premiers are coming together, showing a united front and promising things like retaliatory tariffs when it comes to the United States. Who will be that voice that will come to lead the country? Will it be a federal leader like Pierre Poilievre or even Mark Carney or Chrystia Freeland, or will it be a Canadian premier, which oddly enough, Doug Ford is filling into that space, being a leader of the Federation. He's the chair of the Federation at the moment. Who will be Captain Canada in relation to the United States? And that natural will be something that First Nations and Métis and Inuit communities want to watch closely.
Absolutely. And we're going to continue this conversation on the Truth in Politics podcast, but we'll leave it there for now. Thanks to you both.
Miigwech.
Now here's Fraser Needham to tell us what's ahead on tonight's episode of Nation to Nation.
Coming up right after the news, Donald Trump's tariff threats continue to dominate Canadian headlines. Veteran U.S. journalist Mark Trahant is here to tell us what Native Americans think. Parliament has been prorogued until the end of March, and our country appears to be in a state of democratic dysfunction. Little Times columnist Rose LeMay is here to tell us why this is happening and what some possible solutions may be. With unstable relations between Canada and the U.S. on the horizon, intertribal trade expert Wayne Garnons-Williams says this could present new opportunities for Indigenous people, both north and south of the border. That's all happening in a matter of minutes.
Make sure to tune in for Nation to Nation on APTN tonight after the news. An Indigenous Theatre Festival is making its debut this weekend. We'll tell you where and what it's all about after one more quick break. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Michel Chrétien sent in this incredible shot of the recent wolf moon. You may have seen a stunning moon just the other night. Well, this was the view from Sturgeon River. Thanks for sharing that, Michel. For the chance to be our next photo of the day, send your photos to share@aptn.ca. Now, let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. On the East Coast, -2 for Halifax, -5 for Charlottetown. Nain, -10, mostly sunny there. Kuujjuaq, -11. Saguenay, snowy and -7. Saint-Jovite, -4. Sarnia, 0 degrees. North Bay, snowy and -1. Timmins, snowy, -2 there. Big Trout Lake, -12. Churchill, -13, mix of sun and cloud, -22 for Thompson. Winnipeg, flurries and -2. Dauphin, -1. Regina, snowy and -20 there. North Battleford, +1. Stony Rapids, -25, and La Ronge, -16. Snowy for northern Alberta. Fort McMurray, -20. Peace River, -10. Calgary, mix of sun and cloud, -6 there. Edmonton, -7. Penticton, +1 there. Vancouver, rainy and 5 degrees. Fort Nelson, snowy and -17. Sandspit, 6 degrees. Watson Lake, -17 there. Mayo, sunshine and -27. Wati, -26, mostly sunny. Fort Simpson, -20. Colville Lake, -31 there. Sax Harbor, sunshine and -28. Baker Lake, snowy, -32. Nauyat, -31. Arctic Bay, -33 there. And Igloolik, -35. This weekend in Winnipeg, the Kianan Indigenous Theatre Festival makes its debut. Kianan is a Southern Michif word meaning us. Our intern reporter Tyler Shingoose takes us to the Prairie Theatre Exchange to see what's shaping up.
I just want to say welcome.
Charlene Van Buchenhout's vision to create a safer space for Indigenous artists has come to fruition.
It's the inaugural festival for Kianan, and it's an Indigenous theatre festival to celebrate, acknowledge, honor, and showcase our Indigenous talent here in this area of Manitoba from the past, present, and for the future.
Artists and creatives alike will share their work and make new connections through readings, workshops, and play presentations. Creatives are those who create new works, particularly in the arts, through the imaginative process. Métis artist Katie German is a director for one of the plays at the festival.
It's, I think, extremely important. I mean, we've got the biggest Indigenous population in Canada per capita, and so I think having an Indigenous theatre festival in Winnipeg is so necessary.
In Canada. Yeah.
In a world where it is hard to find authentic representation, this festival gives artists the chance to showcase and celebrate their work, as well as make new connections.
There wasn't a space to do Indigenous work when I was a kid, and looking on the stages and trying to see myself reflected, I didn't have that. And so having this space to be able to have people come and see and build the community of actors that are up and coming, and also honor the actors that did pave the way to be able to do all this work, that's what it is.
Ian Ross created Farewell nearly 30 years ago, a comedic drama about a First Nations effort to self-govern after their chief leaves to gamble in Las Vegas. Ross, who is Métis and Ojibwe, is back to share that piece of Indigenous theatre history with the newer generation. He says festivals such as Kianan are important for emerging artists in theatre to get their feet wet.
There always is, right? And you got to start somewhere, and I'm really glad that they've started this, and the work Charlene's done. And as far as where it can go, the sky's the limit.
As a Métis from the Red River Nation, Charlene opted to honor her heritage and drew inspiration from the Michif language to name the festival. The Kianan Festival will be happening throughout this weekend at the Prairie Theatre Exchange. I'm Tyler Shingoose with APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Thanks for that, Tyler. And that's all the time we have for your Thursday news. An all-new episode of Nation to Nation is coming up next, so stick around for that. And as always, for news anytime, head over to our website at aptnnews.ca. I'm Savannah Kelly. Marcy Miigwech, thank you for joining us. Have a great night.